Cold rain poured from the dark sky, falling hard on the silent streets of the human colony city. Neon lights flickered in the distance, reflecting on the wet ground. The air was heavy with the smell of rust, oil, and rainwater. Most people had already gone inside, hiding from the night. Only one man walked alone, Daniel, making his way back from a long shift at the repair docks. Daniel's coat was soaked, and his boots splashed in small puddles. He was tired, hungry, and thinking only of reaching his apartment. But then, as he passed a narrow alley, something caught his eye. There, half hidden in the shadows, sat a figure against the cold brick wall. She was small, shivering, and hugging her knees as if trying to disappear. Daniel stopped, his instincts telling him to keep walking. The colony was not safe at night. Thieves, gangs, and worse moved in the dark. But something about the figure made him pause. Her skin had a faint shimmer, almost like moonlight on water. Her hair clung wet to her face, and her eyes, large, luminous, and a strange violet, stared back at him. She was not human. Daniel realized at once that she was one of the alien refugees who had arrived months ago. Many of them struggled to survive here, with no home and no one to help them. This one looked like she hadn't eaten in days. Her lips were pale, her breathing shallow, and her clothes, thin and torn, clung to her as the rain fell harder. Daniel took a slow step forward. "You're going to freeze out here," he said quietly. The girl flinched, pressing herself against the wall. "I don't have anywhere to go," she whispered, her voice trembling. Her accent was strange, her words careful, as if she was afraid to say too much. He could have left. It wasn't his problem. And helping an alien could mean trouble. But something in her voice, something in the way she tried to hide her fear, stopped him. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lyra," she replied after a pause, her eyes never leaving his face. Her hands were empty, except for a small cloth bag. It looked so light it couldn't possibly hold much. Lyra's gaze dropped to the wet ground. "I can't pay for food," she said softly, "but I can offer you something." Daniel frowned. The words were strange, not what he expected. "What do you mean?" he asked. Lyra slowly reached into her bag and pulled out a small, glowing crystal. It shimmered faintly even in the rain, light swirling inside like trapped stars. Daniel's eyes widened. He had seen such crystals before, rare alien artifacts, often illegal to own. "I will give this to you," Lyra said, her voice shaking, "in exchange for food and a place to stay, just for tonight." Daniel looked at her, soaked, shivering, and so obviously desperate. This was no trick. She was offering something precious just to survive another day. "Where did you get this?" Daniel asked carefully. Lyra's violet eyes flickered with fear. "That doesn't matter," she said quickly. "Only that if I stay out here, I will die." Her voice cracked on the last word. She hugged herself tighter, shivering violently. As the cold wind swept through the alley, Daniel's thoughts raced. Taking her in could mean danger. Anyone looking for that crystal might come after him. But walking away, he couldn't. The way she looked at him, not with trust, but with the smallest hope, made it impossible. "Come on," Daniel said finally. Holding out his hand, Lyra hesitated, staring at it as if it were a trap. Then, slowly she placed her cold, trembling fingers in his. Her touch was strange. Her skin was smoother than human skin, almost delicate. He helped her to her feet, and she swayed as if she might fall. They stepped out of the alley into the rain. Daniel pulled off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. She blinked at him, surprised. "You're helping me?" she asked quietly. "Yeah," Daniel said, "but we need to move fast." They walked through the wet streets, Lyra staying close behind him. Daniel glanced back now and then, noticing how she kept glancing at the shadows. It was as if she feared someone was following them. When they reached the small building where Daniel lived, he unlocked the door quickly and guided her inside. The warmth hit them at once, and Lyra let out a small sigh. She stood near the heater, her wet hair dripping on the floor. Daniel set the crystal on the table, its glow filling the dim room. He didn't know what he had just gotten himself into. But as Lyra's eyes met his, he knew one thing. This was only the beginning of something far bigger than either of them. Lyra sat at the small table in Daniel's apartment, her wet clothes now replaced with an old sweater and blanket he had found for her. The soft hum of the heater filled the silence. Her violet eyes kept moving between Daniel and the glowing crystal on the table. She seemed nervous, as if deciding whether to speak or stay silent. Daniel set down a steaming cup of tea in front of her. She stared at it for a moment before wrapping her thin hands around it. The warmth seemed to calm her slightly. "You can tell me now," Daniel said quietly. "Where did you get that thing?" Lyra's fingers tightened around the cup. "It is called a Shayara core," she said slowly. "It belongs to my people. Or it did, before it was taken." Her voice had a strange sadness, a weight that made Daniel lean closer. "I took it back," she continued. "But they found out. They will not stop until they have it again." Daniel frowned. "Who's they?" Lyra's gaze drifted to the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. "They are called the Varakan Forcers, a group that hunts for lost relics. They serve no law except their own, and they will kill anyone who stands in their way." The heater's hum suddenly felt louder in the small room. Daniel realized what she was saying. She wasn't just a homeless refugee. She was a fugitive carrying stolen alien tech. And now, because he had brought her here, he was part of it. Lyra leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I cannot go to the authorities. Humans will hand me over to avoid trouble. I cannot hide forever. I need someone who can move where I cannot. Someone who knows this city better than they do." Her eyes locked on his. "That is why I made you the offer." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Offer? You mean giving me this crystal?" Lyra shook her head slowly. "The crystal is not payment. It is a promise. If you help me reach the Vault of Stars, you can take anything inside it for yourself: wealth, knowledge, human or alien technology. Anything." Daniel leaned back. This was insane. A stranger breaking into his life, talking about hidden alien vaults and treasure. But there was something in her tone, not greed, not trickery, but desperation. She wasn't promising riches to tempt him. She was offering it because she had nothing else to give. "You're telling me," Daniel said slowly, "that this thing can lead us to some alien treasure room?" Lyra nodded. "It can lead us to more than treasure. It can lead my people to freedom." There was a moment of silence, only broken by the soft crackle of the heater. Daniel stared at the swirling light inside the crystal. It pulsed faintly, almost like it was alive. A part of him wanted to throw it out the window and forget all of this. Another part, the reckless part, wanted to know more. Lyra sipped her tea, her hands still trembling. "If I stay here too long, they will find me," she said. "If you turn me away now, I will not live to see the morning." She didn't beg, didn't plead. She simply stated it, as if she had already accepted her fate. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. He didn't owe her anything, and yet he remembered the way she looked in the rain, broken and cold, still clutching the crystal like it was the last piece of her soul. That image burned in his mind. "All right," he said finally. "I'll hear you out. But you'd better start from the beginning." Lyra's lips parted slightly in surprise. She set down the cup and took a deep breath. "Then you must know the truth about why I came to this planet," she said, her voice steady now. "But once you know, there is no turning back." Daniel's pulse quickened. Something told him this was going to be far more dangerous than he had imagined. And as Lyra began to speak, the shadows outside his window seemed to grow darker. The rain had stopped outside, but the sound of water dripping from the rooftops echoed faintly through the narrow streets. Daniel's apartment was small, barely big enough for one person, and now it held two strangers from different worlds. Lyra sat cross-legged on the couch, wrapped in his old blanket, the faint glow of the Shayara core on the table casting shifting light across her face. Daniel moved around the kitchen, heating up some leftover stew. The smell filled the air, warm and comforting. But Lyra's eyes weren't on the food. She kept glancing toward the locked door and the window. Every creak of the building made her tense, as if she expected someone to break in at any moment. "You're safe here," Daniel said. Setting the steaming bowl in front of her, Lyra nodded but didn't start eating right away. Instead, she picked up the spoon and turned it slowly in her fingers. "You don't understand," she murmured. "Safety is an illusion. They have ways of finding what they want." Daniel sat across from her. "You said you stole that crystal from the Varrock enforcers. How?" Lyra looked at him for a long moment, then gave a faint, bitter smile. "They thought I was nothing, a street orphan, invisible, easy to overlook, so I walked right past them." She tapped the side of her head. "We can change the patterns in our skin, make ourselves less noticeable, blur into the background. It's not perfect, but it's enough to fool most eyes." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Camouflage?" Lyra nodded. "It's how I stayed alive this long." She finally took a bite of the stew, her shoulders relaxing slightly. Her violet eyes softened for the first time since he found her. But just as quickly, the wariness returned. "They will send hunters," she said quietly. "Not drones this time, not soldiers. Hunters trained to track people like me." Daniel frowned. "How would they even know where to start looking?" Lyra's gaze shifted toward the crystal, the Shayara. "Core is not just a key, it is alive in a way. It pulses with energy that can be traced. They will follow it, and when they come, they will not knock on your door." The faint hum of the crystal filled the silence, almost as if it had heard her. Daniel leaned back in his chair, suddenly aware of how fragile his small apartment felt. "So what's in this vault that's worth risking all of this?" he asked. Lyra hesitated, her fingers tightening around the spoon. "Not gold, not jewels, not weapons," she said softly. "Memories. Entire histories of my people, stored in light. Everything that was stolen from us when the Varrock destroyed our homeworld." Daniel stared at her. "You're saying this is about saving your culture?" Lyra met his gaze. "It's about making sure my people are not erased from the galaxy." For a moment, Daniel didn't know what to say. This wasn't the kind of trouble he had imagined when he found her in that alley. This was bigger, older, and far more dangerous than just hiding from some alien gang. Suddenly, a faint sound broke the moment. A low hum from outside. Lyra froze, her eyes darting to the window. Daniel stood and moved to the side of the curtain, peering out carefully. A small drone hovered near the building, scanning the street with a sweeping blue light. It lingered for several seconds before drifting away into the night. Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. "They've already started looking." Daniel turned back to her. "You said they can track the crystal." "Yes," she replied. "Which means we don't have much time." She stood, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. "If you help me, we have a chance to reach the vault before they do. If you don't, I will leave now so they do not harm you." Daniel looked at her for a long moment, then at the crystal still glowing on the table. Something deep in his gut told him that sending her away would not save him. It would only delay what was coming. Outside, the dripping of rainwater seemed louder, sharper, as if the city itself was holding its breath. The city night was never truly dark. Faint neon signs flickered in the distance, and the wet streets glistened like glass under pale lights. But tonight, something else moved in the shadows. Something searching. Daniel had pulled the blinds shut. But Lyra still sat on the edge of the couch, her eyes fixed on the door. The Shayara core sat on the table, glowing faintly, almost as if it sensed the danger too outside. The hum of distant engines came and went, mixed with the low thrum of the city's power grid. Then it happened, a sound too precise to be random. The faint hiss of hydraulics, the soft click of metal against wet pavement. Daniel moved quietly to the window and lifted one corner of the blind. What he saw made his stomach twist. A tall black figure stood under the streetlight, its armor smooth and gleaming. Its head was covered by a mask shaped like a bird of prey. Eyes glowing red, it turned its head slowly, scanning the street. Two smaller shapes followed, drones. each with narrow blue beams sweeping across walls and doorways. Lyra's voice was tense. "That's not a soldier," she whispered. "That's a Varrock hunter." Daniel looked back at her. "You've dealt with them before?" Her gaze hardened. "No one deals with them twice." The hunter moved with a strange grace. It stopped at the corner, one of the drones drifting toward Daniel's building. The soft hum grew louder, the beam of blue light crawling closer to the window. Daniel backed away. "They're scanning the block," he said, his voice low. Lyra stood, pulling the blanket off her shoulders. "We have to go now," Daniel blinked. "In the middle of the night?" "We'll stand out." She shook her head. "Better to be a shadow than a corpse." She reached for the crystal, but Daniel stopped her hand. "They can track it, right? Won't taking it with us make it worse?" Lyra hesitated. "If we leave, they'll know someone had it, and they'll search every door. It's safer with me." The hum outside grew sharper. The drone was close. Daniel grabbed his jacket and an old satchel from the wall hook. "All right, but we use the back exit," he said. They moved to the rear of the apartment, where a narrow stairway led down to the alley. Every step creaked under their weight. Every sound felt too loud at the bottom. Daniel eased the door open, just enough to see the alley beyond, dark, damp, and littered with crates. No one in sight. He motioned for Lyra to follow. The moment they stepped out, the night air felt heavier, as if the city itself was holding its breath. They kept to the shadows, moving quickly but quietly. Lyra's bare feet made almost no sound on the wet ground. She glanced over her shoulder every few steps. "They're not far," she whispered. "I can feel it." A faint mechanical hiss answered her words. Daniel froze. A shadow slid across the far end of the alley. Too tall and too sharp to be human. They ducked behind a stack of crates. Through a gap in the wood, Daniel saw the hunter pass by, its head tilting as if listening. The red glow of its eyes cut through the darkness. For a moment, Daniel thought it would turn and walk away. Then, without warning, it stopped, its mask tilted directly toward their hiding spot. Lyra's breathing quickened, her hands tightening around the crystal. The hunter stepped forward, slow, deliberate steps, the sound of metal against stone echoing in the alley. Daniel's heart pounded. If they ran now, the drones would see them. If they stayed, the hunter would find them. And then, from somewhere deeper in the city, a sharp siren blared. The hunter froze, its head snapping toward the sound. With a mechanical hiss, it signaled to the drones, and they drifted away in the opposite direction. Lyra exhaled shakily. "They'll be back," she whispered, "and next time, they won't be distracted." Daniel knew then that this was no longer about deciding whether to help her. The moment the hunter had looked in their direction, the choice was made for him. They were both part of the hunt now. The siren's echo faded into the night, but Daniel and Lyra didn't waste a second. They slipped deeper into the maze of back alleys, the cold air thick with the smell of wet stone and machine oil. Above them, towering buildings loomed like jagged cliffs, their windows glowing with scattered light. Daniel led the way, moving quickly but keeping to the shadows. He knew the old routes from his years working in the docks, service tunnels, forgotten stairways, and rusted maintenance. Bridges that most citizens didn't even notice. Lyra followed close behind, her small frame moving with surprising speed, her bare feet almost silent on the damp ground. A faint hum rose in the distance. Daniel glanced up and spotted two drones sweeping through the streets above, their blue searchlights cutting through the night. "They're still looking," he whispered. Lyra's eyes flickered toward the rooftops. "They will never stop," she replied. "Not while I have this." She held the Shayara core close to her chest, its glow faint but steady. Daniel wanted to tell her to hide it, but he knew it wouldn't matter. The hunters could feel its energy like a pulse in the air. They reached a steel door tucked into the side of a crumbling warehouse. Daniel pulled an old keycard from his jacket and swiped it, the lock clicking open with a tired beep. Inside was darkness and the heavy smell of dust. "This way," he said, stepping into the narrow service tunnel beyond. The tunnel was long and lined with rusting pipes. Water dripped from the ceiling, echoing off the metal walls. Their footsteps sounded too loud. But Daniel kept moving. Halfway through, Lyra suddenly stopped, her eyes going wide. "They've split up," she whispered. "One hunter is ahead, one is behind." Daniel's stomach tightened. "They're hurting us," he muttered. He scanned the tunnel, spotting a small maintenance hatch halfway up the wall. "It's a tight squeeze," he said, "but it leads to the old transit line. They won't expect us to go that way." Lyra didn't hesitate. She climbed quickly, her movements precise. Despite the narrow space, Daniel followed, pulling the hatch closed behind them. The air in the old transit tunnel was cooler, filled with the faint smell of ozone from long-dead train systems. They moved along the abandoned track, the only light coming from the faint glow of the crystal in Lyra's hands. The silence here was heavy, broken only by the distant rumble of the city far above. Then, from the darkness behind them, came a low mechanical growl. Daniel froze. "That's not a drone," he said. Lyra's grip on the crystal tightened. "No," she whispered. "That's a hunter." The sound grew closer. Daniel's pulse quickened. Running would give them away, but staying meant death. He scanned the walls, spotting a collapsed section of track ahead where rubble created a narrow path upward. "There!" He pointed. They scrambled over the broken concrete, their hands scraping against cold stone as they climbed. A beam of red light cut through the tunnel below. The hunter's silhouette appeared, tall, precise, unstoppable. It stepped onto the track, its head tilting as it scanned the air. For a moment, Daniel thought it had seen them. Then Lyra's skin shimmered, her outline blurring. She grabbed Daniel's arm, pulling him close against the wall. The hunter's gaze swept past them, not seeing. It moved forward slowly, searching, its metallic footsteps echoing in the dark. Only when the sound faded into the distance did Lyra release her hold. Daniel stared at her. "You hid both of us?" Lyra nodded faintly. "It's harder with two, but I learned long ago. Sometimes survival means being unseen." They reached the surface through a half-buried stairwell, emerging into a side street lit by broken neon signs. The city felt alive around them, lights flickering, wind howling through the gaps between towers. They had escaped for now, but Daniel knew the hunters would adjust. Next time, disappearing wouldn't be enough. The side street was quiet except for the low hum of a flickering neon sign above a boarded shop. Daniel kept moving, guiding Lyra. Through the narrow lanes, he knew of one place they might rest, a small garage owned by an old friend, a man named Keller. Keller had helped Daniel before, back when work was scarce and the docks were rough. If anyone could give them shelter for a night, it would be him. They reached the garage, its wide metal door half open, light spilling out into the dark street. Inside, the air smelled of oil and metal, tools scattered across the workbenches. Keller looked up from under the hood of an old speeder. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with streaks of silver in his hair, and the same quick grin Daniel remembered. Well, Keller said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Didn't think I'd see you this side of the city again." Daniel stepped inside, motioning for Lyra to follow. "Need a favor," he said. "We just need a place to stay for the night." Keller's eyes flicked to Lyra, taking in her alien features, her strange violet eyes. He didn't comment, just nodded toward a small side room at the back of the garage. "You can use the storeroom. It's quiet, and no one comes by this late." Relief washed over Daniel. Finally a chance to rest. Lyra stepped inside the room, setting the glowing crystal on a small crate. For a moment, the warm light filled the space, and she let out a breath she'd been holding for hours. Daniel leaned against the wall. "Thank you, Keller. I owe you." Keller chuckled. "You've owed me since that job on Pier 12, remember?" The easy smile made Daniel relax, but Lyra didn't seem at ease. Her gaze lingered on Keller longer than necessary. As if weighing something in her mind, she whispered to Daniel when Keller stepped out, Are you sure we can trust him? Daniel nodded without hesitation. He's saved my skin more than once. He's solid. Minutes passed. The sound of tools clinking in the main garage. Then, faintly, Daniel heard something else. A short burst of static like a come signal. He frowned, moving toward the half-open door to listen. Keller's voice came through, low but clear. Yes, I've got them here, the girl and the artifact. I want payment in full. Daniel's stomach turned to ice. He pulled back his mind. Racing. Keller had called the hunters. Lyra must have seen the change in his face. They're coming, aren't they? She asked quietly. Daniel nodded. Stay quiet, he whispered, and get ready to move. Before they could slip out the back, the main garage door rattled as something heavy landed outside. The sound of hydraulics and the metallic hiss of armor shifting filled the air. A shadow fell across the light spilling under the door. Tall and sharp-edged, the hunter had arrived. Keller stepped back into the storeroom doorway, blocking their path. Nothing personal, Dan, he said, his grin gone cold. But this is too big to pass up. Daniel's jaw tightened. You're selling us out to killers. They're paying more than I'll see in 10 lifetimes. Keller replied. Before he could move closer, Lyra's skin shimmered, her form blurring into the shadows. She grabbed Daniel's arm and pulled him sideways, vanishing through a narrow gap between crates. Keller shouted, "They're in the back!" A beam of red light swept through the storeroom as the hunter stepped inside. Its metal talons scraped the floor, the sound sending chills up Daniel's spine. They ducked through the service door, spilling out into a side alley just as the hunters' claws slammed into the wall where they had been. The night air hit them like ice. Daniel didn't look back. He could hear the metallic footsteps closing in. Keller's betrayal still burned in his mind, but there was no time for anger now. Only escape. The alley twisted and turned, every corner leading deeper into the city's forgotten industrial zone. Daniel's lungs burned, each breath sharp in the cold night air. Lyra ran beside him, clutching the Shiara core close to her chest. Behind them, the hunter's heavy footsteps and the distant whir of drones echoed like a relentless drumbeat. They burst out onto an open loading yard. The ground slick with rainwater, rows of abandoned cargo containers stood like silent giants, their metal walls streaked with rust. In the far corner, under a sagging tarp, sat an old transport shuttle, its white paint chipped, its engines dark. Daniel's eyes locked on it. "That's our way out," he said. Lyra hesitated, scanning the shadows. "They'll see us before we reach it," she warned. Her words proved true. From the far end of the yard, the hunter emerged, stepping into the open, its glowing red eyes locked on them. The sound of its servos rising like a growl. 2 drones drifted in from above, their blue beams slicing across the ground. Daniel grabbed Lyra's hand. "Run for it," he said. They sprinted, boots splashing through shallow puddles, the beams chasing them across the yard. The hunter moved faster than Daniel expected. Its steps long and precise, it raised one clawed hand, and a net of crackling energy fired toward them. Daniel yanked Lyra to the side, the net slamming into a cargo container, sizzling as it burned through metal. They reached the shuttle, scrambling up the side ramp. Inside, dust and the stale scent of old fuel filled the air. Daniel dropped into the pilot's seat, hands moving over the cracked controls. "It's dead," he muttered. "Hasn't flown in years." Lyra stepped forward, placing the Shiara core into a circular slot on the file console. The crystal's glow spread through the panels, and the engines hummed to life. Daniel's eyes widened. "You had this planned?" Lyra gave a faint smile. "I knew the core could power it, but I didn't know if you'd be willing to fly." Before Daniel could reply, the hunter landed on the ramp with a heavy thud. Its claws dug into the metal as it began to pull itself inside. Lyra's voice was steady but urgent. "If we take off now, we can lose them in the upper airways, but if we stay and fight, we can end this hunter here." Daniel's fingers hovered over the controls. A part of him wanted to blast off and leave the danger behind, but another part, the part that had led him to help her in the rain, told him that running would only delay the inevitable. He glanced at Lyra. "What do you want to do?" Her violet eyes met his, unwavering. "I will follow your choice," she said. "But remember, if we run now, they will chase us forever." The hunter's claws slammed against the cockpit frame, its red gaze burning into them. Daniel made his decision. With a sharp motion, he pulled a lever, flooding the shuttle's side thrusters with power. The sudden blast sent the hunter flying off the ramp, crashing into the wet ground below. The shuttle lifted into the air, rain whipping against its hull. Below, the hunter rose slowly, its head tilting upward as if memorizing their path. Lyra stood beside Daniel, her hand resting on the console. "This is not the end," she said quietly. "It's only the beginning." Daniel didn't argue. He knew she was right. Somewhere out there, the vault of stars was waiting. And so were the enemies who would do anything to stop them. The shuttle vanished into the storm-filled night, leaving only the sound of its engines fading into the distance.